Many of us say it's dying we fear, not death. Ron Delbane, nationally known spiritual director and teacher based in Birmingham, Alabama, teaches us that God is present in dying as in living. Knowing this, we can embrace the dying process and be fully there for each other.
In the process of death and dying, it's not uncommon to experience moments for which there are no words. Some people are more aware of these moments than others. Some are afraid of them. Some talk about sensing God's presence. To explore the sacred in death and dying is to be alert to the holy, to be aware of those sacred moments, and to look for the deeper meaning. Exploring the sacred in death and dying involves several things that are helpful for us to do. Saying goodbye, creating or having rituals for passage which help us say goodbye, accepting our feelings, moving through the hurt of our grief, telling the story of those holy moments that we experience, being present not only to the dying person, but also to others who are involved in the family. Listening to your inner voice and perhaps risking some new behavior or going into places of mystery. And communicating as clearly and positively as we can. I wanted to do a video focusing on one family, interviewing all the family members so that we could see their diversity and feelings and thoughts, and also so that we could see their struggle as they explored the sacred in death and dying. I chose signposts of their journey to be the focus point of interviews. And so this is the story of one family. This one family happens to be my family. Let me introduce ourselves to you. Dad is 92. Mother is 86. And at the beginning of this story, they both are living in Florida. Eleanor, my wife, and I are both 55 years of age. Our son Paul is 27 and lives in Berkeley, California. Our daughter Anne is 23. At the age of 15, as a result of congenital neurologic imbalance, Anne's disease manifested itself and she has been in a wheelchair ever since. 4 years ago, when she became unable to live independently, she moved back home and lives with us. We are a typical family, but we are also not a typical family. We are not a typical family since the majority of my work in the past years has been working with people who are sick and dying and their families. Eleanor has a full-time practice as a spiritual director, and so she is used to dealing with the mysteries of life and the risks that people take as they move into the holy moments. We as a family have been through stress and trauma with chronic disease and illness. And so, in a sense, we've had some experiences. But we are a typical family as well, because no matter how much education or experience you have, when it's at your own doorstep and someone you love is dying, you become very vulnerable. And in vulnerability, there's no status. This was a hard video to make. I looked forward to interviewing each one of the family, but I had no idea how powerful of an experience that would be for me. We want to invite you into our life, and our story begins a year and a half ago.
I got sick. First thing I know, I'm in a hospital with pneumonia. They got rid of the pneumonia, and the hospital got rid of me.
You were really active up until that January, going to the Y 3 days a week, and
Yeah, I drove the car. I went places. But just like that, my heart began to fail me.
It was scary, realizing that I was down there alone with him.
You've really not been somebody who's really called on many other people either.
No, I've always been self-reliant, and I felt that I should do it myself. But then when you're faced with it, it's a little hard to ask somebody to do something for you. I hit bottom before I realized that I should ask for help. I had a hospital bed for him, and I had my bed then beside there. And I got up one morning and I went to tuck a sheet in the hospital on the side of the bed, and I could not raise the mattress. I didn't have any strength left to raise the mattress to tuck the sheet in. And I sat back in the bed and I thought, this is it.
I was in Chicago at a conference, and in the middle of the conference, I received a phone call from Eleanor. And as Dad so aptly said, my whole life changed. She told me that Dad was in the hospital and that Mother had called and that she couldn't handle it. So I left the conference early and flew directly to Florida. That began a round of trips back and forth, and I began to feel divided. Half of me was dealing with my mother and father, helping them make decisions, looking at options in their life, trying to arrange for things in Florida. The other half of me was with Eleanor and our children, taking a look at what the options were for us, struggling with what was the next thing to do. On one visit to Florida, my dad, with tears in his eyes, simply said, "Son, you've got to do something. We can't do it any longer." We entered seriously into discussions of what alternatives there would be. We investigated all kinds of facilities for them to live in Birmingham, near us. They talked about ideas, we talked about ideas. Dad came up with a suggestion. He said, "Ann's going to need her own space at some point in your house, and you and Eleanor need your own space. How about if we sell our house down here in Florida, you add on, and we come and live with you?" I went home thinking about that suggestion. It was a tough decision. Eleanor and I talked about our privacy. Ann talked about her space. The decision we made was that Dad's suggestion was the right one for us as a family.
Living on the West Coast, that distance kind of took me out of the decision-making process in a sense, where it's not that I felt one way or the other, but realized that it would mean a lot of changes in the family dynamic for, for you and Mom and Ann.
I knew I wanted to be close to your parents, to have them near us, and to be more open and direct in that process. And one of the biggest things that freed me up to do that was I saw you change in relationship to them just in those few months when you were going down there, when he was in the hospital and out and back and forth so much, that you started to open up more, be more direct, more honest with them, and that was extremely helpful in that whole process of deciding to bring them up here anyway.
That I wanted to know them and to hear stories and a lot of those wonders that grandparents can share with their grandchildren. And so I was very excited, but also I was aware, well, if they move up here, then, they're going to be here. And I wasn't too sure how I felt about that, because I was used to my own space. I was used to, not being a grandchild every day.
Well, I made a decision about them being there, that I would find ways to really connect, particularly with your mother, to connect with your dad, but particularly with your mother. And a way to connect with her is to do things together.
It's hard to describe my emotions, the ups and downs, sometimes seemingly both at the same time. We felt we'd made the right decision, yet there were times we'd look at one another and say, "Are we nuts?" Over a period of 3 months, we were thinking about the decision. But in 1 week, everything had to be made. We had to decide about a move, to sell their home, find a place to rent for them until we could add on an addition, look for doctors. All of this happened so quickly, and in the midst of that, we didn't know whether Dad would survive the flight up to Birmingham. I flew down, flew up with them, and when we arrived in Birmingham, relieved, Dad just began to sob.
I realized that for him, in a way, it was a journey into death, and accepting that, or really facing that reality, because he was moving home to die.
That was a long ride, very painful. My legs hurt. You didn't get up from the seat, and you just bore the pain. And when we finally got to Birmingham, I cried. Maybe for joy, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it was getting rid of the pain of the legs and the body. Get free.
Yeah. I think that's the first time I ever saw you cry like that.
I think that's the first time I cried to myself too.
Uh-huh.
He didn't even cry at his mother's funeral. And when I see him cry, it's quite emotional. I mean, we'd pray together, and he'd start crying, and I'll start crying. And he said one night, he said, "We should do more of this together."
When I saw your dad cry more and your mother cry more, what was most helpful to me was to see that they were free to do that, because I knew the feelings were underneath. And for me, when the feelings are there underneath, if they're expressed openly, I relax.
The more I was able to express my own feelings, the greater health and freedom I experienced. And a big part of that health and freedom came when Dad went on hospice. I was then able to go back to a role of being just a son, not someone who had to be in charge of everything and work out all the process. Soon it became clear that Dad would not live long. We called people home. Paul came home from California. Dad's favorite younger sister and her husband came from Ohio. And we waited. But in the midst, even in the face of death, Dad never lost his sense of humor.
And I figured, hell, if I'm going to go, I'm going to go as a clown. So I went and got a straw hat, put a tie on, to make it a clown, you know. Figured, hell, if I'm going to go, I may as well make people laugh.
Mm-hmm. We took a picture of that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And surprise, I didn't go. And I haven't been going since. But it's hard. I don't think of dying. Not one bit. I think more of eliminating the pain.
After we had a meal together and prayed together, and Grandpa just looked so weak and was having trouble breathing, and then got up to go lay down. I think there's this feeling of, that's it, he's going to die now. And then everyone kind of went to go lay down and take a nap. And that for me was hard, because it was like, wait, Grandpa's going to die now, and everyone's just going to take a nap. But I think for me, because I had always been away, it was like I was there, so I wanted to spend the time being attentive, not be there and taking a nap.
We all gathered and we had a ceremony of saying goodbye, you know, having communion, having our last meal together, doing anointing, and then we all laid down for a nap, and it was like, okay, this will be it, you know, this is really beautiful, and then by golly, we all got up from the nap, and it was like, wait a minute, this didn't go how we had thought it was going to go.
Dad did not die that afternoon or that evening, nor any time within the past year. He has been on hospice and then graduated from hospice as he got better, went back on hospice and graduated, and now for the fourth time and his last, he is back on hospice, getting weaker each day. The roller coaster ride is more than I would ever have expected it to be, even though I had talked about people being on a roller coaster ride. When you expect someone to die, you say your goodbyes, and then a week later, you wonder if it really happened.
Well, you feel very frustrated, particularly when you've been active all your life, helping other people. Now I gotta have help. If you could do something worthwhile while you're in that condition, it wouldn't be so bad. But you get tired out. You think you can do a lot of things. Oh, I think of a lot of things I could do. But no sooner I think of them, I'm tired.
I know he's ill. He doesn't complain. He's worried that he's trouble for me. And he gets out of patience, and he doesn't like to be told things. And maybe I do tell him in a wrong tone or a wrong way. And he'll kind of snap back at me, and then I realize, well, he's not himself. And lately he's been nearly listless. I speak to him, and he looks at me. Well, I said, "Do you hear me?" He didn't have his hearing aids in. So it's difficult. But at the end of the day, you know, he pets you on the leg, and do the best I can, that's all.
You're doing a good job, Mom.
Thanks.
Many of the ways we communicated as a family in the past just don't work anymore. Dad has changed. Because of his weakened condition and his memory loss, he is different. Mom has trouble communicating with Dad. Dad has trouble communicating with us. I have trouble communicating with Eleanor. Eleanor feels some stress in communicating with me, with Mother. Anne has trouble communicating with Eleanor and I. So we're struggling to learn new ways to communicate. There are some good parts. In this past year, my father and I have spoken more together than we have in the past 54 years of my life. He has said to me everything that I've ever hoped he would say to me. I have been able to say to him everything I've always wanted to say to him. There are times when Eleanor and I decide we need to have time alone. We go out. We go off alone Sometimes it's just one of our offices to sit and to talk directly and clearly with one another, to share about what is going on. We try to visit more and more together with Mom and Dad so that we both hear the same conversations, so it's not a reporting one to the other all the time. So there are good things and there are things that we struggle with.
We've set clear boundaries right up front. And what I liked about that is we talked about that as a family. And we talked about what it might be and talked about our expectations and shared before they moved in. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how it's going to happen. We don't know when he's going to die or she's going to die. And the difference for me is that as a family, we've agreed to talk about it as it happens and to keep our communication with each other open.
Now that they live at home and his health has declined the way it has, he doesn't really get on the phone anymore. So if I call, I talk to Grandma and get a very kind of veiled view of what's actually going on, and I never really get to speak directly with Grandpa. Right now, it's more that I just want to chat or say hello and don't want to make it this huge, big thing or this dragging out of the process of saying goodbye and lamenting the goodbye, but just to say hello. I know that, you know, you're going through a lot and that you're closer to the family now, and that even though I'm not there, I'm still attentive to what's going on.
The more attentive I try to be present to Dad and Mom and Eleanor and Ann, and the more I try to pay attention to my own inner voice, the more I am aware of the surprises and the scary parts of those holy moments and what they bring. What's the scariest part for you?
Whether I can pick up myself and yet I see other people that have gone through it, and I think I've got to. Mm-hmm. I get scared. What are you going to do? I've got to face it. I think being closer to you and the family has helped.
He was talking about how he was just so tired, and he asked me if I would look after Grandma. And I said, yes, I will. And I said, do you feel it's time, you know, for you to die? And he said, I'm not sure yet. And I said, okay. And he said, you know, our Father, who art in heaven. And I'm thinking, okay, am I to join in? Am I listening? What's going on here? And he kept going, and when he got to on earth as it is in heaven, he turned to me and he said, where do you think heaven is? What do you think that means, on earth as it is in heaven? And all of a sudden, I was aware of a few things. One, he's 92 and I'm 23 and he's asking me about something. And then my next thought was, well, he's in the process of dying and I've experienced that process as well. And so we're connected in that.
What do you want me to say at your funeral when I preach about you?
Say what you think in your heart. Say he was a good man.
Mm-hmm.
He understood people, helped people.
Okay.
I know you'll do a good job. When I'm dead, I can't hear you. So be careful what you say. Thank you, Ronald.
You're welcome, Dad. That was a holy moment. But our story's not done. And this is certainly not the story that I thought I would be living at the age 55, living in a household with our daughter and my parents, struggling to explore the sacred in death and dying. But it's where we are. Sometimes it's symbolized by the 12-foot hallway between our space and Mom and Dad's space. Some days that 12 feet seems like it's 12 inches. Other days, it's not close enough. So I hope that this experience of seeing our family struggle with exploring the sacred in death and dying has given you some insights that you might better understand your exploration. You know, having said everything, I can say that it probably just doesn't get any better than hearing, "Thank you, son," and saying, "You're welcome, Dad."